This is the second in a three-part series, and the second episode in our latest season covering unsolved homicides across the United States. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are solely the interviewee's own. All individuals are presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. There is discussion of crime scenes, autopsy, murder, and of drug and alcohol dependency and of intimate partner violence in this series. For resources, please reach out to 800-799-SAFE or 7233 or thehotline.org. This is the Fall Line. Last time, we began our coverage of the 1998 murder of Sylvia Lou Dowdell. Sylvia was born in Opelika, Alabama in 1960, and her father was a well-known figure around town, a wealthy businessman who could provide well for his family, and for the first few years of Sylvia's life, which meant comfort and stability. But he died when she was only 5 years old, and the life he'd built did not survive him. Her mother struggled in the years that followed, and Sylvia was raised, for the most part, by a family friend whom her children would come to call Grandma TK. Sylvia had her first child at 15, and by her early 20s, she was the mother of 4. By the time she reached adulthood, she'd begun to struggle with addiction. At one point, she spent 2 years at the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women, and her children stayed behind with Grandma TK while she was gone. By the time Sylvia came home, Grandma TK was already sick. She died not long after, and the family lost the home that they'd had with her, ending up in public housing back in Opelika. It was during that period that Sylvia met a new boyfriend. 2 of her older children, Precious and Steve, call him their mother's boyfriend and their stepfather interchangeably. But to the family's knowledge, the 2 never married. Precious told us that at first, he seemed like a good provider. But he moved Sylvia and her children away from Opelika, down to Tuskegee, to a house on a hill. And there, the relationship turned violent. Precious would come home from school to find the house torn apart and her mother shut behind a closed door, beaten while the children were gone. Sometimes the family ran to motels to get away from him, and Precious's biological father helped them escape more than once. But Sylvia always ended up back at that house. And in a closet in that house, there was a gun. Precious came across it one day while she was putting away laundry. A long gun, black and brown, kept beside the work uniforms that her mother's boyfriend wore. Sylvia told her to never touch it. Precious told us that the shotgun was something she saw often after her initial accidental discovery. She recalled a specific moment where she alleges that law enforcement came to the house in Tuskegee.
I've saw him carrying it to his truck before. I've also woken up out of my sleep in the middle of the night, and the police were outside my window there in the driveway in Tuskegee, and there are these blue flashing red lights, and I'm just like, what is going on outside? So I get up to peep out the window, and I'm like, oh my God, 2 or 3 police cars in the yard. What's going on? And I get up and I kind of make my way in there to see where my mom is. And I was like, what's wrong? What's going on? And she was basically like, they're taking the gun away from him. He basically had the gun out on my mama. It's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. We're asleep. She's afraid. So she calls the police to come take the gun from him. And she did this numerous times. And his mom would go down to the police department. They had to hold it for so many hours, like 24 to 72 hours. His mom would go to the police department and get his gun back for him. And he would have it back.
Precious isn't sure why anyone would get that gun back for him, and she says that she was never told the reasoning behind it. We were unable to access any potential incident reports related to this issue, so we don't know the details either. But as the level of violence in the house rose, Sylvia and her children, they left more often, and for longer stretches of time.
We left Tuskegee. We would run away when he was at work. He went to work at night. And time it got dark, we would pack our clothes really, 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 really fast. And my mom would say, get your stuff. And we would get these big black trash bags and put our clothes in them. And we would have to walk up the road carrying trash bags. But here's the kicker. Go back to my mom's autopsy report. What did they find near the body? They found trash bags near her body. So we'll take the black trash bag, put all our clothes in it, put the baby's milk in it because she has a newborn infant. And we would walk up the road in the dark, and my dad would meet us. We would call my dad. My mom would send me to the next door neighbor's house because my stepdad would keep the phone turned off, so my mom wouldn't have a way to use the phone. So my mom would tell me to go next door and dial my dad's number and tell him to come and get us. We're going to be down there waiting on my dad to come. My mama was so scared and in a rush to get them down there. She would get her newborn baby. She would get all of us and walk up the road in the dark. We would walk through the bushes. And finally, my dad would come down the Highway 29 and pick us up from the side of the road carrying trash bags.
Did he do that more than once?
Yes. But I never forget the final time he did it because it felt like the final time. I could tell that we weren't coming back this time. I felt it. When we left there, we went to my aunt's house, which is my mom's sister. And so my dad takes us to the house, my aunt's house with my mom's sisters. And I never forget 2 or 3 days later, it's raining, it's storming. Who shows up? Mom's boyfriend. And what does he want? It's like a Lifetime movie. He wants his 2 children. He wants his daughter and his son. His daughter is 1, his son is 3. My mama is sitting there crying her eyes out. He's getting them out of her arm and saying, I'm taking them back to Tuskegee. And he took them. He took my mama kids from her and put them in the car and drove them back to Tuskegee. And not kept them himself, gave them to his mom.
Precious knows that their escapes occurred, time and again, for about a year. She can mark that by her youngest sister's age. As she said, the final time, she thinks her sister was about 1 year old. And after Sylvia's boyfriend went to Opelika and took the babies back to Tuskegee, Sylvia and her remaining children lived with Sylvia's sister for a time. But, Precious said, DHR, the Department of Human Resources, the functions of which include Child Protective Services, was eventually made aware of Sylvia's issues. Though she had stable housing with her sister, there were outstanding concerns regarding her substance use issues and the children's general welfare.
DHR had somehow became involved with my mom. She was an alcoholic. So, of course, DHR is looking in over us to make sure we're being taken care of. So I think she went to the program through a program that puts mothers through rehabs. She was killed when I was 13. So she started that rehab stuff when I was about 11.
Precious can't recall precisely how many times or for how long Sylvia was in rehab. The final time, she might have been in inpatient care for about 6 months. Precious knows it was a program designed for mothers, and with the aim of reuniting them with their children. Precious also remembers that in 1997, Sylvia successfully completed rehab, and she returned to Opelika, where she was assigned to spend a short time in a halfway house. The goal was to help her transition back to the full-time guardianship of her children, and the first step was to secure work and then housing. Precious said that her mother did both.
She's been to a women's halfway house program. For the first time, I see my mom with a job. She has 2 jobs. She's a waitress and she's cleaning up at Shoney's Inn and this hotel. She's working at Denny's, which is a restaurant. She's working at Shoney's Inn. And she's gotten her own house. I've never seen her with her own house without, government assistance. Now she has her own house and we're living with my aunt, my mom's sister, and we're getting ready to go back and live with our mom. She's getting herself together. She's getting off drugs, getting off alcohol. And of course, she has these times where she gets back on it and then she gets off it. It's almost like, the up-down effect, like a roller coaster effect. But she's trying to, I don't know, maybe balance it all out from being in that domestic violence. She's trying to make it out. And she's made it out. She's away from an abusive boyfriend. But you got to remember, she has 2 kids by him, a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. And he's keeping away from her because she won't come back down there, basically. When we go visit my mom, I'm always asking, where's my sister? Where's my brother? Is he going to bring them up here? No, he ain't going to bring them. Sometimes he's supposed to bring them and he never shows up. So it's almost like he's using the kids as bait, like as a pawn. And I think what hurts me so bad with him is he's actually the first boyfriend of my mom that I kind of thought that I might have liked it because I saw a father figure. He ran all the bad people away from my mama. I felt like he tried to get her off drugs. He tried to get her off alcohol. He tried to show her better. But I think my mom had so much damage and he had damage in his life of watching his parent, his dad beat his mom into submission.
Precious told us that in the spring of 1998, it was a fragile time for her family. They were hopeful at Sylvia's progress, but worried about her continued contact with her boyfriend regarding the youngest children.
She gets out of rehab in the halfway house. She moves across the street in a house across the street from the halfway house that we used to visit her at. My aunt would take us to visit her on Saturdays. So she moves into the house, a duplex right across the road from the halfway house. It's very safe. She gets her job at Denny's, at Shoney's. She's happy. You know, she's off drugs, but she's still in kind of like a drug environment a little bit, still being friends with some of the same friends that were on the drugs that you were on. My aunt is taking us over there on Saturdays, probably like around 11, and she'll come back and get me and my siblings about when it gets dark, probably about 7 o'clock. We're going back home with my aunt. So we're doing this on a couple of Saturdays, and we're waiting for my mom's boyfriend to bring the 2 kids up there that he never brings up there.
The absence of her babies haunted Sylvia. She wished to totally cut ties with the father of her youngest children, but as long as he had them in his custody, she couldn't do so. And Precious says that there was always the promise of a visit or time with the kids. In fact, he'd said that Sylvia might see them on Mother's Day. That was May 10th in 1998, a day before Sylvia's body was found. Of course, by that time, she'd been missing for over a week. In the spring of 1998, Sylvia was stuck in a sort of limbo, wanting to be free of any influence and violence, but without her youngest children. As for her oldest kids, her eldest son was living out on his own. Steve had been in prison for several years, and he relied on phone calls and visits to keep him up to date. And Precious and her next youngest sister were still living with their maternal aunt. But Precious saw her mother often. They had structured visits at the new house and check-ins on the phone. That close contact allowed them to see when things began to take a turn again.
We go over to my mother's house one day, and she's beat up, standing in the door. And we ain't having visitation like we normally have it. We talking to her from a screen door. But okay, fine. So we leave and we go home. Then we start coming over there a little bit more. Mama already drunk. Okay, she bad drinking. Real bad. What's triggering this? Somebody coming over there beating you up and going back to Tuskegee. It's definitely triggering you. So you're drunk. And one day I come home from school and my aunt is like, nobody has seen your mom. How does she know nobody has seen him? Because my mom's brother has called my aunt, which is my aunt's brother as well. And he said, hey, I haven't seen Sylvia. I've been over there. I normally see Sylvia every day or every other day. I haven't seen her. She's not at home. She's not at work. The lady goes by there to take her to work. She's not there. Nobody's seen Sylvia.
While Precious and her aunt did not panic at first, they were concerned. Their first instinct was to try dropping by Sylvia's house at various times of the day to see if they could catch her at home. They also went by her jobs. But on a return visit to the house, Precious wasn't satisfied with knocking, so she decided to see if she could get inside.
I went up to the door one day. I kept knocking and she didn't answer. I put my hand in the screen door and opened the door. And when I opened the door, I got this eerie feeling. And I flicked the light switch to turn it on, and it wouldn't turn on. But my eyes took a picture of everything that was going on. There was a bag of dirty clothes beside the bed, like she may have gotten undressed. There were dirty socks and like a uniform in a bag, a plastic grocery bag. And on the bed, there was a half-eaten Hardee's breakfast biscuit on a red saucer. And the book, A Divine Revelation Between Heaven and Hell by Joyce Myers, was flipped over.
The scene was odd, and Precious decided to explore a little further.
So something said, well, flip the light switch so I could, walk around in there because it was pretty dark. And I flipped the light switch on and off, and it never came on. So that's what made me think, was somebody playing in her breaker box? Like you marking, like you got to get up because somebody's knocking at the door. So you flip your book over, her sandwich is on the bed, and she goes to see whatever she's going to see. Remind you though, flip the light switch to turn the lights on in there. The lights can come on. Did somebody get in her breaker box? And when she got up, she put a sandwich down, flipped the book over. So somebody flips the breaker and cuts her lights off, because you got to remember, this is an old house, so the breaker box is outside. So she goes to flip her breaker back on, Even if it's in the kitchen, she goes to flip it back on. The last scene I saw in my mama's house, my mama would have never eaten half of a biscuit and left it there. She was too clean. So that tells me that whatever happened in that scene, you were interrupted.
And you didn't think the power was turned off?
No, I did not. Because I had never seen her with her. We had never been in situations where her power would be cut off.
Though it's possible that Sylvia's power could have been turned off by the electric company, Precious doesn't think it's likely. She didn't find any turn-off notices posted at the house or mail that would indicate a late bill. She can't definitively say that the breaker was turned off, but it feels most likely to her, particularly based on the scene inside. It was clear to Precious that Sylvia had been interrupted, and it was also clear that she wasn't going to return to the house. So they expanded their search.
My aunt says one day, when you get out of school, we're going to go look for your mom. I'm knocking on doors because my aunt don't know where my mama be at. They live two different lifestyles. My aunt is like a real church going lady, stay at church all day. My mama, she'll be at parties and stuff, fun type. So my aunt takes me to look for my mom. I'm knocking on doors. We're going over different bootleggers' house. That's the people that sell the alcohol illegally. I'm knocking on their doors, and I'm like, hey, anybody seen my mama? I'm all at the grocery store. Anybody seen Sylvia? Well, they ain't seen her. And we do this for about a week.
Was your mom reported missing to the police? Do you know, was there a missing persons report?
Yes, my aunt tried to report it. They said my mom wasn't gone long enough to report it. They said she couldn't report it. She had to wait. When my aunt tried to make this report, she probably had been missing going on about a week.
Precious said that the search went on for days, with no sign of her mother. But then, one afternoon, her aunt's phone rang.
And one next thing you know, I come in from school one day, my aunt is on the phone. My aunt hands me the phone and she says, here, give them a description of your mom. She said, tell them how your mama look. And I'm like, what? And I get on the phone with the forensic science people from Montgomery, and they asked me, they said, can you give me a description of your mom? And I tell them she has a scar on her left arm. She has screws in her left arm because she broke her arm in a car accident. She has brown eyes. She's light-skinned lady, real light-skinned. She may be about 5'1". She may be 5'2". And she has a chipped tooth. And the guy's basically, he knows it matches. But he's like, I'll give you all a call back in a couple of days. And not even 24 hours later, the detective and the funeral home man, Detective Marvin Creighton, came to our house, and my aunt tells us all to go in the room, all the kids, her grandkids, my mom's kids. So we go in the room, and the detectives are in there talking to my aunt, and they say, well, sorry to tell you, but that was your sister that they found on County Road 22.
And were you able to hear that, or did your aunt come and tell you after?
My cousin heard it. My little cousin, if I was 13, she was probably only about 8. And we wanted to know what was going on so bad. So I remember saying, well, go to the refrigerator, act like you're getting some water. And so she goes out there and she's acting like she's getting some water out the refrigerator after my aunt told us not to come out the room at all. She's getting water. And when she comes back to the room, her head is down. And when she lifts her head up, she's crying like so bad. And I was like, what is it? And she was like, Aunt Sylvia is dead. Everybody's screaming and crying. I was like, how you know that? I was like, no, you didn't hear that. You didn't hear that. And she was like, yes, I did. She was like, she's dead. And so my aunt grabs her pocketbook and leaves. I think they want my aunt to do some type of identification, but they can't identify my mom, I think, about her dental record. But it wants my aunt to look at something. I'm not for sure what she went down there and did, but she went to the police department. When she got back, we all were sitting at the kitchen table. I was sitting there coloring, and she walked in and she said, y'all already know. She said, y'all already know what's going on. And I just remember I just started crying uncontrollably. And she was like, that was Sylvia that they found. That was your mama.
You'll recall that Precious's older brother Steve did not get news regularly at that time. As he was incarcerated, he had to wait for visits and letters and phone calls to get word of his family. And he told us that in the spring of 1998, His mother hadn't given him any indication that something was wrong.
No, she would bring 3 of her kids to come visit me, and that's Precious, my other little sister, and one of my little brothers. Not my mama boyfriend children, but my mother other children. She would bring them to come see me.
What kind of sense did you get about how their lives were going during those visits?
It was so much that was being withheld from me. But even my mom, she didn't tell me what was going on. But I seen her in April. I didn't really know too much about the separation. I just was excited to see my mom, and her whole demeanor was, I love you, son, and be a man.
Steve wasn't notified about Sylvia's death until Precious's biological father reached out. He called the prison, and he was able to get in contact with Steve, and then broke the news over the phone. No one in the family had many details then, and they wouldn't until Precious received the medical examiner's report sometime later. We were not able to speak to any current officials in Macon County. Though we reached out, no one responded to our request for comment. But based on the reports that Precious has managed to obtain, we can tell you quite a lot about May 11th, 1998. It was a Monday, the day after Mother's Day, and as you'll recall, Sylvia had been missing for over a week. It was unseasonably hot that spring and dry, with temperatures close to 90 degrees. Still, locals were out and about, even on a weekday. That's how Sylvia's remains were discovered. On the morning of May 11th, a group of fishermen out at County Road 22 saw something in the water. One of them, at a distance, thought it might be a doll. When they got closer and understood what they were looking at, they contacted the authorities. The state medical examiner happened to be in Tuskegee that day, testifying in court, when a county investigator asked him to come out to the scene. He arrived a little after 3 that afternoon, and per his later report, he described the scene: a woman floating face down in the marsh, just off the bridge. Recovering her took some effort. 2 conservation enforcement officers lowered a boat into the marsh, and the medical examiner brought her body to the shore. It was photographed and videotaped, and several items were collected for examination. Among them, 3 garbage bags found near the body, 2 black and 1 light-colored. Sylvia was still mostly dressed in a red sweater and green pants that had been pulled down to her ankles, and with a single pearl earring and a ring set with colored stones. After the search of the area was complete, Sylvia was taken to the state facility in Montgomery. The examination began the next day. Because Sylvia had been in the water roughly for the time that she'd been missing, some of what the medical examiner would normally rely on, the usual markers for estimating when someone died, had become more difficult to interpret. The autopsy found that Sylvia had been shot 4 times. There were 2 wounds to her head, 1 to her chest and 1 to her arm, though the medical examiner believed the arm wound was the result of the same bullet that had passed through her chest. None of the wounds showed powder or stippling, and the marks a gun leaves when it's fired at close range. The medical examiner also noted the presence of bluish-green fibers in at least 2 of her wounds. Only a single bullet was recovered during autopsy, and another was reportedly recovered at the scene. A sexual assault examination was performed, but the condition of her body made it difficult to determine much with certainty. Sylvia was tentatively identified through an old injury, a break in her left arm that had been repaired years earlier with metal plates and screws. Investigators compared an X-ray from that surgery to the post-mortem films, and the hardware matched. It was the same scar, the same arm, that Precious had described over the phone. A toxicology screen was run as well. It found alcohol in Sylvia's system, along with cocaine and a substance called cocaethylene, which forms in the body only when cocaine and alcohol are used together. There was also dextromethorphan, the active ingredient in over-the-counter cough medicine. Additionally, the family shared a ballistics report with us. It was written up in 1999 as part of the investigation into Sylvia's death, and it dealt with the firearms evidence in her case, a number of spent cartridge cases, and the single bullet that had been recovered during autopsy. Without more detail than the report gives us, we can't say exactly where these cartridge cases were found or what relationship each of them had to the crime. Most of them were of a different caliber than the bullet recovered from Sylvia. Most of what the lab examined were .32 caliber cases. There were 17 of those, but 1 cartridge case was of a different caliber, a .30. And that one mattered because the bullet recovered from Sylvia was also a .30 caliber. It was a copper-jacketed round, and when the lab examined it, they found it was consistent with having been fired from a particular type of weapon, a U.S. military M1 carbine, a rifle first made during the Second World War. Precious says that she looked up that kind of rifle much later, and she believes it's the same type that she saw at the house in Tuskegee, the one in the closet. While it's not definitive proof, it's something that she has thought about, and she's wondered how far that potential lead was followed. Sylvia's funeral was held on May 17, 1998, at a chapel in Opelika. She was buried in the town where she'd been born, and where she'd spent her last months of life trying to build something stable for her children. It was a closed casket service, and Steve told us that he was given permission to attend and traveled from prison back to Opelika under guard.
Okay, so they're going to have the funeral. Of course, it's a closed casket. So all my mom people here, I was escorted by 2 correctional officers. And when I get to the chapel, the first person I see on the front row is the boyfriend, my mama's boyfriend. I just looked at him, and he sat right there and caused all of this chaos and confusion and hurt.
Steve said he was not allowed to remain for long, just the length of the service, and a few brief moments to speak with his siblings. He was sad, but he was furious too, because he was sure, he said, that his mother's death could have been prevented.
It wouldn't have happened. I would have protected my mom by all costs.
Precious says that the service was a blur for her, and so were the days that came afterward. And in the weeks that followed Sylvia's death, the family began to learn things. Questions came up that still don't have answers. One of them had to do with a life insurance policy taken out on Sylvia not long before she died, something that Precious barely registered as a child, but could not stop returning to as an adult. Next time on The Fall Line, we continue the story of Sylvia Dowdell's murder, the investigation, and what Precious discovered about a name change and the insurance policy that, perhaps, was worth more if Sylvia died by violence. Anyone with information regarding Sylvia's murder is encouraged to contact the Macon County Sheriff's Office at 334-724-0669. Her family is offering a $5,000 reward in her case. One more thing before we sign off. I'd like to tell you about Advocacy Con, which is happening September 11th through 13th, 2026, at the Albuquerque Convention Center, with virtual attendance available for anyone who can't travel. This is a crime conference built around advocacy, not entertainment, and it brings together families of the missing and murdered, victims advocates, investigators, and content creators for 3 days of education and real case support, and families can set up free exhibit tables to share their loved one's story at no cost. I attended last year with the sister of Sue Lund, formerly known as Ina Jane Doe, and I can tell you firsthand how well organized and genuinely supportive this event is. Registration is open now at advocacycon.com, and if you can't attend, you can still help by donating to a family scholarship through the Impact Advocacy Foundation, or sharing AdvocacyCon's wish list to cover in-kind needs for the event and families that it serves. If you know of a case that should be covered on The Fall Line, there's a link to our case submission form in the show notes. Thank you for listening. The Fall Line is an independent podcast, and we appreciate listener support. It allows us to do research, obtain FOIA, pay our content advisors, and support and donate to the causes we care about. Our therapy fund is paid for through Patreon and Apple Premium subscriptions. If you try out the products we advertise, please use our sponsor codes. It really helps. And please take a moment to rate and review our show in your podcast app of choice. If you listen on Apple Podcast, please be sure to check your subscription to make sure you're set for automatic downloads so that you don't miss an episode. My book, Lay Them to Rest, is out everywhere. Find out more through the link in our show notes. The Fall Line is created by Laura Norton and Brooke Hargrove. The show is written, hosted, researched, and produced by Laura Norton. Engineered by Southern Gothic Media and Rachel Boyd. Content advisement by Vic Kennedy. And special thanks to Liz Lipka.